I picked up the phone thinking it was mine, but the message glowing on the screen belonged to a conversation I was never supposed to see. Still stringing her along, bro? 5 years is crazy. My boyfriend's response shattered my world in seconds. She cooks, cleans, splits the rent. It's comfortable. She's good enough for now. I was 31 years old, and I had just discovered that the man I planned a future with, I was nothing more than a placeholder. He thought I was convenient. He was about to find out just how inconvenient it is when the woman who bought everything in your apartment decides she's finally worth more. Before we dive into the story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a part. And let me know in the comments below, have you ever stayed in a relationship hoping the other person would change? Let's get started. The text message glowing on the screen wasn't meant for my eyes, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I stood in the hallway of the apartment I had lovingly curated for the last 5 years, my hands trembling as I clutched Andrew's phone. It was the exact same model as mine, encased in the same navy blue silicone, which was why I had picked it up without a second thought. But the conversation open on the screen was a foreign language, a language of betrayal. Still stringing her along, bro? 5 years is crazy. When you want to tell her you're not serious. The message was from one of Andrew's gym buddies. My breath hitched in my throat, a physical block that made my chest ache. I waited, praying for a defense, a denial, something that would align with the man I thought I shared my life with. But Andrew's response came through, and it was a sledgehammer to the foundation of my life. Why would I? She cooks, cleans, splits the rent. It's comfortable. I'll settle down eventually, just not with her. She's good enough for now. Good enough for now. The words blurred as tears pooled in my eyes. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, landing with a dull thud on the plush rug I had selected specifically to tie the room's color palette together. Suddenly, the walls of the apartment felt like they were closing in. I was 31 years old. I had invested 5 years, half a decade, into a man who viewed me as a placeholder, a convenience, a roommate with benefits who handled his laundry and half the bills. The memory of a dinner from 3 weeks ago crashed over me with nauseating clarity. I had made his favorite meal, a slow-roasted herb chicken with garlic mash, and halfway through, I had summoned the courage to bring up marriage. It hadn't been a demand, just a gentle inquiry. We lived together. We were in our 30s. It was the natural progression. I remembered asking, Andrew, do you see us getting married someday? His reaction then had been confusing, but now it made perfect sense. The warmth had drained from his face, replaced by a cold annoyance. Are you joking? He had snapped, his voice rising in that way that always made me feel small. We're not that serious. Tanisha, I thought you understood that. At the time, I had gaslit myself. I told myself he was stressed, that I was pressuring him, that living together was commitment enough. He had told me he wasn't ready for that level of commitment, and I had accepted it. But reading the text now, I realized he hadn't said he wasn't ready. He had meant he wasn't ready with me. The sound of the front door opening snapped me back to the present. Andrew walked in, tossing his keys into the ceramic bowl on the entry table. A bowl I had made in a pottery class. He refused to attend with me. Babe, you home? He called out, his voice casual, oblivious. I'm starving. What's for dinner? It was the tone of a man addressing a service provider, not a partner. It was the tone of someone who expected his needs to be met simply because he existed in the space I maintained. I walked out of the bedroom and looked at him. I really looked at him. Andrew was objectively handsome, tall, broad-shouldered, with a charismatic smile that could disarm anyone. But standing there in our living room, looking at me with that casual expectation, the veneer cracked. I realized I didn't know this man. Or perhaps, more painfully, I did know him, and I had been lying to myself for years to make the reality palatable. "Your phone is in the bedroom," I said, my voice sounding eerily calm, detached from the storm raging inside me. "You got some interesting messages." His face went pale instantly. The confident swagger evaporated. "Tanisha, listen." "No," I interrupted, raising a hand. "I'm done listening. I'm done understanding. And I am certainly done being good enough for now." He followed me as I turned back toward the bedroom, stammering excuses. "You know how guys talk. It's just locker room talk. It doesn't mean anything." Your response meant something. I shot back, spinning around to face him. "You call me convenient. You said you'd settle down eventually, just not with me. You reduced 5 years of my life, my love, and my effort into a temporary arrangement that benefits you financially and domestically." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I used to find endearing but now found manipulative. "You're taking out of context." "What context makes that okay, Andrew?" I demanded, my voice finally rising, cracking with the weight of the hurt. "What context makes it acceptable that while I've been planning a future, you've been planning an exit? You've been living in a fantasy where you get all the perks of a wife without any commitment, while I've been auditioning for a role you never intended to cast me in." "I haven't been wasting your time," he argued, his defensiveness shifting to anger. "We've had good times. You've been happy." "I've been happy in a delusion," I corrected him. "And that ends today." I pulled my suitcase from the closet, the vintage leather one I use for client visits. I started packing methodically. I didn't throw things. I didn't scream. I folded my clothes with precision, channeling all my rage into the sharp creases of my shirts. "You're really leaving?" Andrew asked from the doorway, leaning against the frame. He didn't look heartbroken. He looked inconvenienced. "Over a text message?" "Don't be dramatic, Tanisha." "I'm leaving because of 5 years of stupidity," I said, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "Mine, not yours. You knew what you wanted. You wanted a placeholder. I just kept hoping if I loved you enough, you'd eventually want me." "I do want you," he said, but the words fell hollow. "No, Andrew. You want someone to cook your meals and split the rent. You want comfortable. You don't want Tanisha." I packed my essentials: clothes, toiletries, my laptop, my design sketches, and the jewelry my mother had left me. Everything that was truly mine fit into 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. It was a sobering visual representation of how small I had made myself to fit into his world. "Where will you even go?" he asked. There was a flicker of panic in his eyes now, but I recognized it for what it was. It wasn't concern for my safety. It was concern for his logistics. Who would handle the bills? Who would remember his mother's birthday next week? "I'll figure out," I said, zipping the last bag shut. "I've been figuring everything else out alone for 5 years. This should be the easy part." The drive to my best friend Keisha's house was a blur of tears and adrenaline. I called her on the way, sobbing out the basics: the text, the confrontation, the suitcases in my trunk. Keisha, being the rock she always was, didn't ask questions. She just said, "The key is under the mat. I'm leaving work now. Get inside, pour yourself a drink, and wait for me." Keisha lived in a vibrant bungalow on the east side, a house that reflected her joyous spirit. When she arrived, she found me sitting on her guest bed, staring at the wall. She listened to the whole story without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to fury. When I told her about the good enough for now comment, she closed her eyes and exhaled sharply. "I am so proud of you for walking out," Keisha said, gripping my hands. "Do you know how many women would have stayed? How many would have convinced themselves they could change his mind?" "I don't feel strong," I admitted, wiping my face. "I feel stupid. 5 years, Keisha. How did I not see it?" "Because you project your own heart onto other people. she said softly. You loved him deeply, so you assumed he was capable of the same depth. That's not stupidity. Tanisha, that's hope. But now you know the truth. I stayed in her guest room that night, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The silence was loud. For the first time in years, I wasn't worrying about whether Andrew had eaten, or if his work shirts were ironed, or why he seemed distant. The pain was searing, but beneath it, there was a tiny, unfamiliar spark. Relief. 2 days later, Andrew went out of town for a work conference. A trip I had packed his bag for the morning before I found the text. It was the perfect window. I needed to get the rest of my things. Keisha borrowed her brother's pickup truck, and we drove back to the apartment. Walking back was surreal. The air smelled like the expensive reed diffuser I had bought. The throw pillows were dented where he had sat. It felt like a museum of a dead relationship. Where do we start? Keisha asked, rolling up her sleeves. Everything I paid for, I said, my voice hardening. Everything I brought into this relationship. As we started packing, a disturbing realization took hold. I had bought almost everything. The velvet sofa, mine. The mid-century coffee table I had refinished myself, mine. The curated bookshelf, the 4K television, the high-thread count sheets, the kitchen gadgets, the Le Creuset pot, the artwork on the walls. It was all mine. Andrew had moved in with a futon, a PlayStation, and a duffel bag of clothes. For 5 years, I had been subsidizing his lifestyle, creating a beautiful home that he treated as a hotel. He's been living in your house, Keisha observed as we hauled the coffee table out the door. He just had his name on the lease. It took us 6 hours. When we were finished, the apartment echoed. It was barren. No curtains, no rugs, no life. It looked cold and sterile. Exactly how it must have always felt to Andrew, who had never emotionally inhabited it. I sat at the granite counter, one of the few things I couldn't take, and wrote a note. I didn't want to send a text. I wanted something physical he had to touch. Andrew, I took everything that belongs to me, which turned out to be everything that made this place a home. You'll notice the difference. I didn't leave because of one text message. I left because that message revealed the truth I ignored for 5 years. You never saw me as your future. You saw me as a present convenience. I deserve to be someone's absolutely yes. Since I'm not that for you, you are no longer that for me. Do not contact me. We are done. Tanisha. Leaving the key on the counter felt like severing a limb, but as I walked out to the truck, the air outside felt crisper, cleaner. A few days later, I met Julie, a mutual friend of ours, for coffee. I needed to tell someone in our circle the truth before Andrew spun his own narrative. When I told her about the breakup and the text message, Julie didn't look surprised. She looked guilty. Can I tell you something? She asked, stirring her iced tea nervously. Something I probably should have told you years ago. My stomach dropped. What? When you and Andrew were together, he told people you were just hanging out. Even after you moved in, he'd come to parties without you and say he was keeping his options open. He told the boys that you knew it wasn't serious, that you guys had an arrangement. I felt the blood drain from my face. I moved in with him because I thought we were building a life. I know, Julie whispered. We all assumed you knew his stance. We thought you were cool with it. But lately, before you left, he was telling people he was planning to break up with you soon. He said you were getting too naggy about marriage, and he needed to cut you loose before he got trapped. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just him. It was a humiliation that had been happening in front of our entire social circle. I had been playing the role of the devoted wife, while he was playing the role of the burdened bachelor. Thank you for telling me, I said, my voice trembling. I wish I had known sooner, but I probably wouldn't have listened. I'm so sorry, Tanisha. Julie said. Driving away from that coffee shop, the sadness began to calcify into something useful. Anger. And beneath the anger, determination. Andrew had treated me like a stepping stone. He thought I was nothing without him. I was about to prove him and myself very wrong. Living in Keisha's guest room was a sanctuary, but I knew I needed to throw myself into something productive to keep from drowning in the memories. I had been working as a freelance interior designer for years, but I had always kept it small, playing safe. Andrew had called it, though he was the one who discouraged me from taking risks. He had always said, "Why take on the overhead of studio? Just work from a kitchen table." I realize now that keeping my business small kept me small. It kept me available to him. "I'm going to do it." I told Keisha over dinner one night. "I'm going to rent a studio. A real office." Finally, Keisha cheered, raising her glass. "You've outgrown that kitchen table mentality years ago." I spent the next week scouting locations. I found a space in a renovated industrial building downtown. It was rough around the edges, scuffed floors, peeling paint, but it had soaring ceilings and massive warehouse windows that flooded the room with natural light. It was a blank canvas. It was perfect. I signed the lease for Tanisha Price Designs. The next month was a blur of physical labor and creative explosion. I brought in the furniture I had taken from the apartment. I painted an accent wall a deep, calming teal. I set up my drafting table in the center of the room, bathed in sunlight. For the first time, I wasn't designing a space to accommodate a man's taste. I was designing for me. One evening, as I was struggling to maneuver a heavy bookshelf through the door, a voice called out from a hallway. "You look like you could use a hand with that." I turned to see a man standing by the elevator. He was tall, with warm, dark skin, dreadlocks tied neatly back, and stylish tortoiseshell glasses. He wore a crisp linen shirt that suggested professional but creative. "I wouldn't say no," I panted, wiping sweat from my forehead. He set down his leather messenger bag and easily lifted the other end of the shelf. We maneuvered it into place against the wall. "I'm Marcus," he said, extending a hand. "I'm the architect in 3B. Just moved my practice here last month." "Tanisha," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Interior designer. Just moved in today." Marcus smiled, and it reached his eyes. Design and architecture next door to each other? That's dangerous. We might end up collaborating whether we plan to or not. "I could use an architect's eye occasionally," I admitted. "And I definitely need help with my lobby," he laughed. "It's tragic. Welcome to the building. Tanisha." Over the next few weeks, the studio became my haven. I posted photos of the new space on social media, and the response was immediate. People loved the aesthetic. My existing clients were impressed by the professionalism of a dedicated office. I booked 3 new consultations in the first week. Marcus became a fixture in my daily life. It was strictly professional and friendly. We would bump into each other at the communal coffee machine or in the hallway. He would pop his head in to see what I was working on, genuinely interested in my fabric choices or layout sketches. The contrast between Marcus and Andrew was jarring. When I used to show Andrew a design, he would glance at it and say, "Cool, looks expensive." When I showed Marcus, he would lean in and say, "The flow here is interesting. How does this light fixture interact with the natural light in the morning versus the afternoon?" He respected my craft. He saw my intelligence. One afternoon, I was sketching a concept for a new client, a complete renovation of a historic brownstone, when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank, a joint account I thought I had closed. Then came the text from a blocked number. "You really stripped the apartment? Petty much? We need to talk. I'm coming to find you." My heart hammered against my ribs. I had blocked Andrew on everything, but he was finding ways through. The peace I was building felt fragile, like glass. I looked around my beautiful studio, my sanctuary, and felt a cold shadow creep in. He wasn't going to let me go easily, not because he loved me, but because he was losing control. I stood up, walked to the door, and locked it. But as I turned back to my work, my hands were shaking again. I wasn't the same woman who had dropped that phone on the carpet, but the fear was a familiar ghost. I had to be stronger. I had to build walls that he couldn't tear down. The harassment didn't start with a bang. It started with a slow, creeping pressure. First, it was the emails. Long, rambling missives sent from burner accounts. Some were pleading, "I miss you. I made a mistake. Let me fix this." Others were venomous. "You'll never find anyone who puts up with you like I did. You're delusional if you think you can make it on your own." I forwarded every single one to a folder named Evidence on my laptop on the advice of my lawyer. Then came the physical intrusions. Flowers began arriving at my studio. Not just a bouquet, but dozens of red roses daily. It was excessive, performative, and suffocating. The card always read, "For my wife, stop this nonsense." "He's trying to mark his territory," Marcus said one afternoon. He was sitting in my client area, reviewing some blueprints, while I threw another $200 arrangement into the trash bin. "He's not trying to win you back. He's trying to remind you that he knows where you are." "It's working," I admitted, hugging my arms around myself. "I feel watched." "You need to document this," Marcus said seriously. "This isn't romantic. It's stalking." The escalation happened on a Tuesday. I was in a meeting with a brownstone client, a wealthy couple named the Petersons. We were discussing tile samples when the studio door banged open. Andrew stood there. He looked disheveled, unshaven, eyes red, wearing wrinkled clothes. It was a stark contrast to the polished image he usually presented. "Tanisha, we need to talk," he boomed, ignoring the clients. My client, Mrs. Peterson, looked terrified. "Excuse me?" "Andrew, get out," I said, my voice shaking but loud. "I am in a meeting. You are not welcome here." "I don't care about your little meeting." He stepped into the room, aggressive and looming. "You block my number. You ignore my emails. You think you can just walk away from 5 years." "I already did," I said, stepping behind my desk. "You stole my stuff." "I took my stuff. Check your receipts." "Andrew." He lunged toward the desk, slamming his hand down on it. Mrs. Peterson gasped and grabbed her husband's arm. Before I could reach for my phone to call the police, the door opened again. Marcus stepped in. He didn't look like an architect in that moment. He looked like a linebacker. He moved with a calm, terrifying speed, placing himself directly between Andrew and my desk. "The lady asked you to leave," Marcus said. His voice was low, devoid of emotion, but heavy with threat. Andrew sneered, looking Marcus up and down. "Who is this? The new guy you were cheating on me with? Is this why you left?" "I'm a witness," Marcus said, "and the building manager. You are trespassing. You have 5 seconds to walk out that door before I call the cops and physically remove you." Andrew looked at Marcus, then at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes and the sheer physical presence of Marcus. He scoffed, trying to regain some dignity. "You're crazy, Tanisha. You're ruining your life." He turned and stormed out. "I am so sorry," I told the Petersons, shaking as the adrenaline crashed. That was my ex-boyfriend. I apologize for the disruption. "Don't apologize, honey," Mrs. Peterson said, her eyes wide. "That man is dangerous. You need a restraining order." I filed for it the next morning. Marcus came with me to the courthouse to provide a witness statement. The judge granted a temporary order immediately. No contact, 100 yards away from me, my home and my business. Leaving the courthouse, I felt drained. Thank you, I told Marcus. You didn't have to do this. I did, he said simply. Tanisha, can I ask you, was he always like this? No, I said, looking at the pavement. He was indifferent. That was the problem. I think he's spiraling because I was the one who left. He wants to be the one to discard, not the one discarded. Narcissistic injury. Marcus nodded. My sister went through the same thing. It gets worse before it gets better, but then it gets amazing. I started therapy last week. I admitted my therapist says I was in love with his potential, not his reality. That's a hard lesson, Marcus said gently. But you learned it. That night, alone in my apartment, I looked at the restraining order on my coffee table. It was a piece of paper, but it felt like a shield. I was building a fortress, legal, emotional, professional. Andrew had tried to break into my sanctuary, and I had repelled him. I was stronger than I thought. With the legal boundaries in place, a nervous calm settled over my life. Andrew stopped showing up, though I heard through the grapevine that he was bad-mouthing me to anyone who would listen. I didn't care. My business was exploding. The Petersons, impressed by my handling of the incident and my design skills, hired me for their vacation home as well. I hired an assistant, a bright young grad student named Simone, to help with the workload. The studio was buzzing with energy. One evening, Marcus knocked on my doorframe. Hey, my friend is having an art gallery opening tonight. Abstract expressionism. Lots of wine and cheese. I have a +1, and I'd rather bring someone who actually understands color theory. Interested? I hesitated. Is this a date? Marcus smiled, leaning against the door. Do you want it to be? I need to know what it is. I said honestly. I can't do ambiguous anymore. I spent 5 years in maybe... His face softened. Fair. No, this isn't a date. You are healing, and I value our friendship too much to complicate it right now. I'm asking you as a friend and a colleague. Okay. I smiled, feeling a weight lift. Then I would love to go. The gallery was in a chic warehouse district. The art was vibrant and emotional. Marcus introduced me to the artist, and we spent 20 minutes discussing the use of negative space. It was intellectual, stimulating, and effortless. You're different tonight, Marcus observed later as we walked through the exhibit. How so? You're not looking over your shoulder. You seem lighter. I feel lighter, I admitted. I didn't realize how much energy it took to constantly manage someone else's emotions. To shrink myself so he wouldn't feel threatened. You shouldn't have to shrink, Marcus said, looking at a painting of a rising sun. The right environment makes you grow. A week later, a local lifestyle magazine contacted me. They wanted to feature Tanisha Price designs in their Women to Watch issue. The interview was cathartic. The journalist, a sharp woman named Priya, asked about my journey. What advice would you give to women starting over? She asked. I thought about the text message, the empty apartment, the restraining order. I would say, trust your gut, I told her, and never settle for being someone's good enough for now. You deserve to be someone's absolutely yes. If you aren't getting that, build your own table. The article came out 2 weeks later. The headline read, Design of a Lifetime, How Tanisha Price Built Her Dream from Scratch. My phone blew up with congratulations. But amidst the praise, a notification popped up, a calendar reminder I had forgotten to delete. Julie's wedding. It was this Saturday. I had RSVP'd months ago, before the breakup. Andrew would be there. His entire friend group would be there. The Good Enough for Now crew. My first instinct was to skip it. Why put myself through that? But then I looked at the magazine on my desk. I looked at the studio I had built. I thought about the woman who had packed her life into 2 suitcases. If I didn't go, he won. If I hid, he controlled my movements. I called Keisha. We're going to Julie's wedding, and I need to look devastating. Say less, Keisha replied. I'm already in the car. I wore a dress I had designed myself, an emerald green silk gown that draped over my curves like liquid. I had my hair done in a new style, voluminous and free. When I walked into the venue with Keisha, heads turned. I wasn't the mousy, anxious girlfriend anymore. I was Tanisha Price, business owner, survivor. The ceremony was beautiful, though seeing Julie walk down the aisle stung a little. But it was a sweet pain, a reminder of what real love looked like. At the reception, I spotted Andrew immediately. He looked diminished. He had gained weight. His suit looked ill-fitting, and he was nursing a drink alone at a table while his friends danced. I didn't approach him. I danced with Keisha. I laughed with old friends. I congratulated Julie. You look incredible, Julie whispered, hugging me. And I saw the magazine article. I am so proud of you. Thank you, I said, for everything. I was at the bar getting a sparkling water when I felt a presence behind me. Tanisha. I turned. Andrew stood there. He looked tired. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic sort of desperation. You look expensive, he said, trying for a joke that landed flat. I am, I replied coolly. What do you want, Andrew? You're violating the restraining order just by speaking to me. It's a public event, technically, he muttered, glancing around. I saw the article. You're doing well. I am. I miss you, he blurted out. I know I messed up. The apartment is a mess. My life is a mess. I didn't realize how much you did until you were gone. I stared at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No spark, no anger, just pity. You don't miss me, Andrew. You miss the maid. You miss the cook. You miss the rent money. That's not true. I loved you. No, I said firmly, my voice carrying over the music. You loved having me. There is a difference. You told your friends I was a placeholder. You planned to leave me. You wasted 5 years of my life because you were too cowardly to be honest. I was stupid, he hissed, seeing people start to look. But I can change. Give me another chance. We were good together. We were never good, I said. I was good. You were a parasite. His face twisted. The mask slipped. You think you're better than me now because you have a little business? You think you're too good for me? I don't think I'm better than you, I said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. I think I deserve better than how you treated me. And yes, I am too good for you. I always was. You'll die alone, he spat, realizing he had lost. You're too demanding. Better alone than with someone who makes me feel lonely, I countered. Suddenly, a hand rested on my shoulder. I turned to see Marcus. I hadn't known he was invited. It turned out he was the groom's cousin. Is there a problem here? Marcus asked, his voice calm but authoritative. Andrew looked at Marcus, then at me. He saw the easy comfort between us, the way Marcus stood protectively but respectfully. Of course, Andrew sneered. You moved on fast. Did you have him lined up? I spent 6 months fixing the damage you caused, I said, and now I'm building a life. Goodbye, Andrew. Julie's husband, Tom, appeared and firmly guided Andrew toward the exit. Time to go, man. I turned to Marcus, my hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline. You have a habit of showing up when I'm cornered. I have a habit of being where interesting things happen, he smiled. You handled that beautifully, by the way. I was good. You were a parasite. I might put that on a t-shirt. I laughed and the tension broke. I looked at the door where Andrew had exited. He was gone, really gone, and I was still standing 6 months past. Tanisha Price Designs outgrew the studio. I leased a larger space, a full floor in the same building. I now had a team of 4. We were handling commercial projects, model homes, and high-end residential. One evening, after a long week of installs, Marcus came by my new office with Chinese takeout. We sat on the floor of the conference room, eating straight from the cartons. "I have news," Marcus said. "I got the bid for the city library renovation." "Marcus, that's huge." I squealed, hugging him. "That's the biggest project in the city." "I want you to do the interiors," he said, pulling back to look at me. "I don't want to do it without you." "Are you mixing business with pleasure?" I teased. Well, he put his chopsticks down. "I'm hoping to. Tanisha, it's been a year since we met. We've been friends. We've been colleagues. I've watched you rebuild yourself from the ground up. I admire you more than anyone I know." My heart started to race, but it wasn't the anxious racing I used to feel with Andrew. It was excitement. "I'm not looking for a placeholder," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. "I'm not looking for convenient. I'm looking for a partner. I see a future with you, a real one, if you're ready." I looked at this man who had supported me without suffocating me, who celebrated my wins, who defended my boundaries. "I'm ready," I whispered. "Good," he smiled, "because I'm not asking you to be my girlfriend for now. I'm asking to be your absolutely yes." We started dating officially that night. It was different. It was easy. There were no guessing games. If Marcus said he would call, he called. If we made plans, he kept them. We talked about the future openly. A few months later, I heard through Keisha that Andrew had gotten married. He had met a woman and married her within 6 months. "Does it bother you?" Marcus asked when I told him. We were lying on my couch, looking at architectural digests. Honestly, I thought about it. No, I feel sorry for her. He rushed it because he can't be alone. He needs a prop. I hope he treats her better. But I'm just glad it's not me. "You're not a prop," Marcus kissed my forehead. "You're the main character." My business continued to thrive. I started a mentorship program for young female designers. I want to teach them not just about color palettes, but about self-worth, about not shrinking for anyone. One afternoon, I was walking to my car and saw a young woman crying on a bench, holding her phone. She looked about 22. I stopped. "Hey," I said gently, "you okay?" She looked up, mascara running. "My boyfriend just broke up with me via text. After 2 years. I sat down next to her. "Let me tell you a story," I said, "about a text message that saved my life." 3 years had passed since the day I packed my life into 2 suitcases and walked out an apartment that never felt like home. 3 years since I read the text message that shattered my world and, paradoxically, saved my life. Standing on the cantilevered balcony of the home Marcus and I had designed together, I looked out over the city skyline as the summer sun began its slow, golden descent. This house was more than just a structure. It was a physical manifesto of our partnership. We had bought a dilapidated mid-century modern property on the outskirts of the city, a fixer-upper that terrified everyone else but thrilled us. Marcus had handled the structural reimaging, opening up walls and creating sight lines that made the space breathe. I had curated the interior soul of the home, choosing textures of walnut and boucle, balancing bold architectural lines with soft, welcoming warmth. It was a perfect marriage of form and function, much like us. "You're thinking loud again," a voice rumbled from the doorway. I turned to see Marcus leaning against a glass slider, holding 2 glasses of vintage Pinot Noir. He looked effortless in his casual linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms dusted with drywall powder from a site visit earlier that day. "I'm just admiring our work." I smiled, taking the glass he offered. Do you remember what this place looked like when we bought it? The shag carpet? The wood paneling? I try to repress the memory of that carpet. Marcus laughed, joining me at the railing. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me into his side. But look at it now. It just needed someone to see its potential, to strip away the bad layers and build a strong foundation. I leaned into him, the metaphor landing softly between us. Foundations are everything. My business, Tanisha Price Designs, had evolved into a premier firm in the city. We now occupied a bustling 3,000 square foot office downtown. I had a staff of 6, including Simone, who had been promoted to junior partner. We were currently collaborating with Marcus's firm on a massive eco-resort project upstate. Working with Marcus was intense in the best way. We challenged each other, debated color theory versus structural integrity, and always landed on a solution that was better than what either of us could have conceived alone. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. Marcus set his wine glass down on the teak railing and turned to face me fully. His expression shifted, the playful ease settling into something deeper, more intent. "Tanisha," he started, his voice dropping that octave that always made my pulse skip. "We've built a lot together in the last 2 years. This house, the library project, a life. We have—" I agreed, sensing a shift in the air. The birds seemed to go quiet. The wind stilled. "You know, when I met you, you were rebuilding yourself," he said, taking both my hands in his. "I watched you place every brick. I watched you fight for your worth, redefine your boundaries, and create a masterpiece of a life. I told you once that I didn't want to complete you because you were already whole." He paused, his thumbs brushing over my knuckles. "I still believe that. You don't need me. You are a force of nature all on your own. And that is exactly why I want to be with you. I don't want a dependent. I want a partner. I want to build empires with you. I want to argue about tile samples with you until we're 80. I want to witness you." Marcus slowly lowered himself to one knee. My breath hitched, a hand flying to my mouth. It wasn't a grand, public spectacle with flash mobs or cameras. It was quiet. It was private. It was us. He pulled a small, velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside sat a ring that made me gasp. It wasn't a standard solitaire. It was a custom design, a geometric, architectural setting holding a radiant-cut sapphire that shifted from deep blue to teal, flanked by 2 diamonds. It was modern, unique, and utterly me. "Tanisha Price," he said, his eyes shining with unshed emotion. "Will you build a future with me? Will you be my wife?" "Absolutely yes," I whispered, the tears finally spilling over. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly and stood to kiss me. In that embrace, I felt a sense of arrival. I wasn't settling. I wasn't hoping things would get better. I was exactly where I was meant to be, with a man who saw me as his equal, his muse, and his priority. The wedding planning was a breeze compared to the stress I used to feel just trying to pick a restaurant Andrew wouldn't complain about. We decided on a fall ceremony in the courtyard of the city library, the very project that had cemented our professional and romantic partnership. On the morning of the wedding, I sat in the bridal suite of a downtown hotel. My dress hung in the window, a structural, architectural gown in silk crepe with a plunging back and a dramatic train. It was bold and sophisticated. Keisha walked in, looking stunning in her maid of honor dress, holding a bottle of champagne. She stopped when she saw me, her eyes widening. "Okay, stop," she commanded, fanning her face. "If you make me cry before I put my lashes on, I will fight you." I laughed, standing up to hug her. "You look beautiful, Keisha." "I look like a snack, but you look like the whole meal," she retorted. pouring us drinks. She handed me a flute and sat down on the velvet settee, her expression turning serious. "Can I be real for a second?" Keisha asked. "Always. Do you remember the night you came to my house? With the suitcases? You were shaking so hard, I thought you were going to shatter." "I remember," I said softly. It felt like a lifetime ago, yet the memory was sharp. "You kept asking me how you were so stupid," Keisha continued. "You kept asking why you weren't enough." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "I need you to know something. Tanisha, today is amazing. Marcus is a good man. He treats you like royalty. But the real love story here isn't you and Marcus." I cocked my head, listening. "The real love story is what you did in the time between Andrew and Marcus," she said fiercely. "It's you falling in love with yourself. It's you deciding that you were worth more. That is a romance that saved you. Marcus is just a reward." Tears pricked my eyes again. "You're right. I had to learn to be my own absolutely yes before I could accept it from anyone else." "Exactly." Keisha clinked her glass against mine. "To the foundation." "To the foundation," I echoed. The ceremony was magic. The library courtyard was draped in string lights and greenery. As I walked down the aisle, the air crisp and smelling of autumn leaves, I locked eyes with Marcus. He wasn't checking his watch or looking around. He was weeping, openly and unashamedly, watching me come toward him. We wrote our own vows. I spoke of resilience and the beauty of building something that lasts. Marcus spoke of admiration and the honor of standing beside a woman who knew her own power. When he said, "I promise to never dim your light," only to reflect it, I heard sniffles throughout the audience. At the reception, the joy was palpable. It wasn't just a party. It was a celebration of community. I looked around the room and saw the village that had carried me. Julie and Tom laughing at a table. Mrs. Peterson, my first big client, dancing with her husband. My team of designers taking selfies in the photo booth. And Keisha holding court at the bar. Later in the evening, as the band slowed down to play a soulful ballad, Marcus pulled me onto the dance floor. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured into my hair. "I'm thinking about gratitude," I admitted. "For the wine?" "Because it is excellent." I laughed, looking up at him. "For everything, even the bad parts. Even Andrew." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Now that is a plot twist." "If he hadn't sent that text," I explained, "if he hadn't been so careless with my heart, I might have stayed. I might have settled. I might have spent the rest of my life trying to shrink myself to fit into his small world. He did me the biggest favor of my life by showing me exactly what I didn't want. He broke the illusion so you could build a reality," Marcus mused. "Exactly." I looked over Marcus's shoulder, out through the venue windows toward the city lights. Somewhere out there, Andrew was living his life, probably repeating the same cycles, looking for the next convenient placeholder. I felt no anger, only a distant pity. He had looked at a diamond and seen only glass. He had treated a queen like a servant, and in doing so he had set me free. I tightened my arms around my husband, my partner, my equal, my love. He said I was good enough for now, I whispered, the old insult now powerless, a mere footnote in my history. Marcus kissed me, a slow, deep kiss that held all the promise of our future. He was wrong. Marcus said against my lips, "You were never just good enough. You were everything. He just didn't have a capacity to hold you." And now, I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Now," Marcus smiled, spinning me around as the music swelled. "We build forever." I spun in his arms, the silk of my dress flaring out, surrounded by light and love. I had built a business. I had built a home. I had built a self-esteem that was bulletproof. And now I was building a marriage. The foundation was solid. The walls were strong. And the view from here was absolutely spectacular. If you liked the story, please subscribe and hit the like button. Thanks for watching.